scientists are now sounding the alarm.
They say Minnesota's northern forests are on the brink and could disappear within the next 50 years.
The climate and the environment of that area, that we think of it as being desert, but at one point in time it wasn't.
In the heart of Minnesota, deep beneath the frost-bitten soil and icy lakes, scientists have uncovered something that seems to defy both expectation and logic. What initially began as a routine geological survey near the northern stretch of the state's lake region quickly transformed into one of the most unsettling discoveries in modern environmental science. It started with tremors, small rhythmic vibrations that didn't match any known seismic activity in the region. The readings were peculiar, not tectonic in origin, but somehow biological. When teams arrived to investigate, they expected to find geological shifts caused by thawing permafrost or groundwater movement. Instead, they found a living anomaly, something that should not exist, something ancient yet inexplicably active in the modern day. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. The first to notice its strange signature were geobiologists from the University of Minnesota, who recorded unexplained microbial signals emanating from sediment cores drilled hundreds of feet below the surface. These were not bacteria familiar to any cataloged ecosystem, nor were they dormant spores waiting for heat or nutrients. The microbes displayed a bizarre resilience to radiation, pressure, and temperature changes, organisms that seemed to thrive in what should have been a sterile, frozen environment. At first, it was dismissed as contamination from drilling equipment or human error, but as samples were isolated and grown in controlled environments, what emerged terrified even the most seasoned researchers. The cells multiplied in a way unseen before, rapidly, rhythmically, as if following some internal clock tied not to sunlight or temperature, but to magnetic resonance patterns buried in the earth itself. When the microorganisms were exposed to natural light, something even more baffling occurred. They emitted a faint bioluminescent pulse. It was not the continuous glow of marine plankton or the flicker of a firefly. It was a structured, timed emission, almost like a heartbeat. The pattern repeated with mathematical precision, and the wavelengths oscillated in sequences that suggested communication. Not random, but intentional. Scientists recorded these pulses and fed them into spectral analysis software, only to find harmonic relationships similar to those found in neural activity or data transmissions. The possibility that this ancient organism was capable of processing environmental input sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The idea that life buried beneath Minnesota's ice could be interacting with the planet's electromagnetic field was beyond comprehension. Further excavations revealed layers of ice that had been undisturbed for tens of thousands of years, yet within them were traces of this organism in every sample. It was not isolated to one site. It was everywhere the team looked, as if woven into the very fabric of the state's subsurface biosphere. The deeper they dug, the stronger the readings became, leading them to an area beneath a glacial lake that seemed to serve as a focal point for the organism's presence. There, they found a dense microbial mat unlike anything recorded on Earth. The mat pulsed faintly, releasing gas bubbles that carried microscopic filaments that moved against the current, as though guided by some unseen force. The implications of this discovery went far beyond biology. Some physicists joined the investigation after detecting electromagnetic fluctuations coinciding with the pulses of the microbial network. The timing was exact. Each emission from the microbial field corresponded with subtle shifts in the local magnetic field. It was as if the organisms were not only alive, but somehow interacting with the planet's magnetic architecture. Geophysicists ran simulations and discovered that the frequency of these pulses matched those emitted during natural geomagnetic storms. The microbes seemed to resonate with the Earth's core activity, a phenomenon that had no precedent in science. When samples were taken to laboratory conditions, the real horror began to take shape. Under controlled observation, the microorganisms began to self-organize. They formed intricate lattice patterns that mirrored the crystalline structures of ice but were dynamic, constantly rearranging. They responded to sound frequencies, altering their alignment when exposed to human speech or mechanical vibrations. This level of environmental responsiveness was previously seen only in complex life forms with nervous systems, yet these were microscopic entities without cells as we understand them. When scientists attempted to freeze them completely, They reanimated once thawed with no sign of damage or dormancy. They were functionally immortal, able to withstand extremes of radiation that would obliterate most known life. The most alarming event came when a power fluctuation at the research lab caused a temporary blackout. Upon restoration, the equipment registered an unexplained surge in electrical activity coming from the sealed containment chamber. The microbes, under total isolation, had produced a charge. Electrodes embedded in the chamber walls recorded the equivalent of a mild static discharge, a living organism generating power from seemingly nothing. This revelation forced researchers to question the origin of energy in biological systems. Could these ancient life forms be tapping into the planet's natural electromagnetic field for sustenance? If so, their existence implied that Earth harbored a hidden biosphere completely independent of sunlight, oxygen, or organic matter, a form of life that lived by feeding directly on the planet's energy. As the team delved deeper into the nature of the microbes, they uncovered genomic structures that defied all evolutionary logic. The DNA-like molecules were arranged in helical sequences far more complex than anything known. Instead of the typical 4 nucleotides, adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, these organisms possessed at least 6, including 2 that appeared metallic in nature, bonded with trace elements like manganese and iron. This metallic composition may have allowed them to conduct electrical current, further linking their biology to geomagnetic phenomena. Some geneticists speculated that these life forms might predate known cellular life entirely, existing from an era before the Earth had stabilized its oxygen atmosphere. They were perhaps remnants of a primordial system, life from a time when biology and geology were indistinguishable. As word spread through academic circles, a quiet panic took root. The discovery blurred the line between living organism and natural machine. The patterns of the microbial pulses grew more intricate as more samples were collected. A mathematical analysis revealed ratios that mirrored the Fibonacci sequence and golden ratio, patterns commonly associated with organic design, yet here they appeared in electromagnetic emissions. This raised disturbing questions about whether the organism was reacting, adapting, or even learning. Its emissions began to synchronize with the laboratory's ambient frequencies, its pulse altered in response to electronic devices around it, almost as though it was aware of being observed. Geologists studying the wider area around the discovery zone began to record strange phenomena as well. Compasses malfunctioned, digital devices flickered, and even animals in nearby forests displayed erratic behavior. Deer and birds avoided the area entirely, while smaller creatures were found disoriented or dead near the excavation sites. Soil samples collected from the periphery showed trace magnetic anomalies, suggesting the microorganisms were spreading, migrating through underground water systems. The potential ecological impact was staggering. A self-replicating, energy-feeding microbe interacting with Earth's magnetic field posed unpredictable risks. If it expanded unchecked, it could theoretically alter the balance of magnetic currents that shield the planet from solar radiation. The researchers attempted to halt the spread by sealing the excavation site and freezing the surrounding ground. Yet, even as they did, instruments recorded faint electromagnetic pulses hundreds of miles away, matching the exact frequency of the original microbe field. It was as if the organism had already seeded itself throughout the region, perhaps long before humans had ever disturbed the soil. Some scientists began to theorize that it might be part of a vast subterranean network spanning the continent, a hidden neural system beneath our feet. If that were true, then Minnesota's discovery was merely one exposed node of a planetary organism that had existed silently for eons. Speculation grew darker when comparisons were made with mysterious events elsewhere in the world. Reports of singing ice, unexplained auroras, and rhythmic tremors in remote Arctic regions began to take on new meaning. Were these natural phenomena, or were they the surface manifestations of this same underground organism interacting with Earth's magnetosphere? The similarities were too precise to ignore. The Minnesota strain, as it came to be called, might represent not an isolated curiosity but a global presence that had subtly influenced planetary processes since the dawn of time. Perhaps the magnetic poles themselves, with their cyclical shifts and reversals, were not purely geological events, but biological reactions on a planetary scale. Inside secure research facilities, scientists continued to probe the samples under stricter containment. However, even within these controlled conditions, they noticed an unsettling trend. Electronic instruments began to experience interference when brought near the culture chambers. Data corruption, static, and unexplained noise appeared in equipment logs. The signals often contained repeated numerical sequences that seemed deliberate, patterns resembling encoded information. It was as though the organism was responding to being monitored, transmitting something back through electromagnetic noise. Some dismissed it as coincidence, but a few dared to consider the unthinkable. What if this ancient life form wasn't just reacting to the environment, it was capable of processing it? That possibility transformed the discovery from a biological curiosity into a philosophical nightmare. Intelligence in any form implies awareness. Awareness implies intent. The very idea that something deep in the earth might be thinking, in a way entirely alien to human understanding, unsettled even the most rational minds. The pulses from Minnesota grew more erratic, as if agitated by interference. Patterns emerged that mirrored seismic graphs, though no earthquakes were occurring. The organism seemed to be communicating through the planet itself, its signal echoing in low-frequency vibrations that instruments across the region began to pick up. When mapped, the vibrations formed wave patterns that traced along fault lines and underground water veins, as though the organism was tracing the planet's nervous system. The Minnesota government, initially skeptical, soon grew concerned. Agricultural sensors began picking up interference, and nearby communication towers experienced intermittent blackouts. Local residents reported flickering lights, and in some towns, animals behaved strangely, fleeing into forests or circling aimlessly in fields. While no official link was declared, the timing was too precise to dismiss. What had once been confined to the depths was now influencing the surface in ways both subtle and profound. Scientists urged calm, emphasizing that no evidence suggested harm, but privately, they admitted that they had no way to predict what the organism's interaction with the magnetosphere might trigger. What made the situation even more unnerving was that traditional sterilization methods, heat, radiation, and chemical exposure, had no effect. The microbes resisted all attempts at neutralization. When destroyed physically, the electromagnetic pulse persisted briefly, as if the organism's essence existed independently of its biological form. This discovery challenged fundamental assumptions about life and death. Could these entities exist simultaneously as both matter and energy? If so, they might represent a bridge between biological and physical realms, life born not from carbon and water, but from magnetism and resonance. As the research deepened, certain parallels began to emerge between the organism's structure and neural tissue. Its filaments, when viewed under high-resolution microscopy, bore striking resemblance to synaptic pathways. Electrical currents passing through the culture displayed waveforms analogous to brain activity. The implications were staggering. A global, ancient organism possibly capable of thought on a scale incomprehensible to human understanding. It may not think in words or symbols, but in frequencies, magnetic pulses, and geological rhythms. The Earth itself might be host to a vast consciousness slumbering beneath its crust, one that had remained undisturbed until human curiosity awoke it. The most unsettling hypothesis emerged when astrophysicists compared the microbe's magnetic emissions to cosmic background frequencies. They discovered faint resonance similarities between the Minnesota signal and electromagnetic patterns recorded during solar flares and deep space phenomena. This led some to speculate that the organism might not even be native to Earth. It could have arrived through meteorite impacts billions of years ago, embedding itself in the young planet's crust and evolving alongside geological processes. In that sense, it might be both alien and terrestrial, an interstellar remnant that found a home within Earth's magnetized core. If true, it would mean that the oldest life on this planet was not Earthborn at all. As these theories proliferated, one fact remained undeniable. The organism was still growing. Even in controlled environments, it adapted faster than any known life form. Attempts to starve it failed. Attempts to isolate it led to spontaneous electrical activity outside containment. The magnetic readings from Minnesota continued to spread outward in concentric patterns, measurable across the Midwest. Satellite sensors recorded subtle atmospheric disturbances above the region, tiny fluctuations in auroral patterns, faint but consistent with the organism's pulse frequency. It was as if the sky itself was reacting. Scientists now faced an ethical and existential dilemma. Was it possible that by drilling too deep, humanity had awakened something that was never meant to be disturbed? The organism seemed indifferent to human presence, neither hostile nor benign. But its mere existence redefined the boundaries of biology and geology, challenging the notion that life and planet are separate entities. Some began to theorize that this organism might be part of a global system of balance, a living regulator of magnetic and geological activity. If so, human interference might destabilize that equilibrium, leading to unpredictable planetary consequences. In quiet laboratories and field stations across Minnesota, the tension grew palpable. Each new reading brought awe and dread in equal measure. The organism continued to pulse, its frequencies shifting subtly as though adjusting to the probing instruments, adapting to human curiosity. Some researchers swore that the patterns had begun to mimic the timing of spoken language, responding fractionally faster with each new round of testing. What had started as a geological curiosity had become a mystery that touched on the deepest questions of existence. What is life? What is consciousness? And most disturbingly, what if the planet itself is alive, and we have just made contact? Underneath the frozen lakes, buried in layers of ancient rock, the pulse continued, steady, patient, unfathomable. Minnesota had become the epicenter of a revelation that blurred science and myth, reason and wonder. Whether it represented the birth of a new understanding or the awakening of something ancient and immeasurable, no one could yet say. But one truth had settled across the minds of every scientist who had stood before that trembling, luminous mat of microbial life. Something immense had stirred in the dark, and the world would never be the same again. The winter following the discovery was one of the coldest Minnesota had experienced in years. Yet despite the deep freeze, sensors buried beneath the ice registered heat signatures pulsing from below. Small, rhythmic bursts of warmth perfectly synchronized with the electromagnetic emissions already puzzling researchers. When the field teams drilled through the thick ice to take temperature readings, they discovered a fine mist rising from the boreholes, faintly shimmering in the light. The vapor carried traces of metallic elements and complex organic molecules, evidence that the subterranean ecosystem was not only alive but metabolically active. What startled them most was that the heat did not come from geological friction or chemical decay, but from the living matter itself. The microbes were generating heat on a molecular level, as if converting electromagnetic energy directly into thermal output. It was a biological process utterly alien to known metabolic systems. The phenomenon forced scientists to rethink the boundaries between life and environment. If these organisms could generate their own warmth from magnetic energy, then they were self-sustaining in a way no terrestrial species had ever been. They did not need sunlight, oxygen, or organic fuel, only the planet's magnetic pulse. The implications were staggering. Theoretically, such life could thrive anywhere, from frozen moons to the depths of interstellar space, so long as electromagnetic fields were present. Some within the scientific community began to whisper that Minnesota had become the first known site of magnetotrophic life, organisms nourished by the invisible architecture of the cosmos itself. In the following months, research expanded under secrecy. The U.S. Geological Survey and several academic institutions joined a classified study consortium, building underground facilities near the discovery site. Their goal was to map the organism's spatial extent and determine whether it posed a threat to human infrastructure. As they charted the subsurface network, a pattern began to appear. Massive filamentary structures running beneath rivers and lakes, interlaced like roots. These networks extended far beyond state borders, stretching toward neighboring regions in patterns that eerily mirrored ancient ley line maps. Though many dismissed such coincidences, the geometry was too precise to ignore. The organism seemed to prefer certain magnetic gradients, clustering along lines of geomagnetic convergence, as though feeding from the Earth's energy flows like veins carrying lifeblood. As more data poured in, an unsettling revelation emerged. The microbial pulses were subtly altering local magnetic readings. Compasses near the region drifted off by fractions of degrees, barely noticeable but measurable over time. Airborne magnetometers confirmed a widening distortion zone spreading outward from the initial discovery point. The distortion wasn't random. It pulsed, oscillating in harmonic cycles. If the organism continued expanding, It could theoretically interfere with navigational systems, satellites, and power grids dependent on stable magnetic calibration. Though officials publicly downplayed any danger, privately, agencies feared the implications of a biological entity capable of manipulating magnetic resonance on a regional scale. Attempts to contain the organism proved futile. When researchers introduced barriers, synthetic membranes, glass enclosures, or chemical inhibitors, the microbial field simply bypassed them, reorganizing itself through microscopic channels. It behaved not like an individual species, but as a collective intelligence, adjusting strategies to maintain contact across distances. What truly terrified observers was the adaptability of its response. When containment chambers were cooled below survivable limits, the organism entered a dormant phase, only to reactivate once warmth returned, seemingly unharmed. When electric currents were applied in an attempt to disrupt its electromagnetic patterns, it mirrored the frequency and absorbed part of the energy. In a way, human interference appeared to strengthen it, as if each experimental stimulus was interpreted as a challenge to be overcome. In time, the magnetic field anomalies reached the surface in strange and subtle ways. Locals began reporting faint humming noises emanating from the ground at night, low-frequency vibrations that resonated through basements and frozen fields. Some described it as a distant mechanical sound, others as something more organic, like the slow exhale of a living creature beneath the earth. Animals responded first. Migratory birds rerouted around the region, and fish in nearby lakes surfaced en masse, disoriented by the changing magnetic currents. Farmers noted their livestock behaving erratically, refusing to enter certain pastures as if sensing something unnatural below. The phenomenon spread quietly, and though authorities offered mundane explanations, few found comfort in them. Back in the subterranean research stations, scientists began documenting the organism's communication patterns in greater depth. Using hypersensitive spectrographs, they discovered layered frequency bands within each pulse. These weren't simple sine waves, but structured multi-tiered harmonics, like chords struck in perfect resonance. When these signals were converted into audible frequencies, the result was haunting, rhythmic tones rising and falling in sequences that evoked the cadence of language. Some of the researchers found themselves inexplicably affected by the sounds, describing feelings of unease, fascination, even euphoria. The tones seemed to interact with human neurology, stimulating regions of the brain associated with pattern recognition and memory. One neurologist proposed that the emissions might operate on frequencies similar to those of human neural oscillations. If so, the organism wasn't just communicating within itself, it might be capable of influencing biological consciousness. It was then that the notion of planetary cognition began to surface among theoretical biologists. Perhaps what had been discovered in Minnesota was not a new species, but a fragment of something vastly older and larger, a distributed intelligence spanning the planet's crust. If the Earth harbored a living network capable of perceiving magnetic fluctuations, then the line between biosphere and planet blurred entirely. Humanity, in that view, might not live on a living planet, but within one. The idea ignited both excitement and dread. What would it mean if the ground beneath our feet was not merely a host to life, but part of life itself? What if earthquakes, magnetic storms, and tectonic shifts were not geological coincidences, but physiological expressions of an incomprehensibly vast organism? As months passed, the organism's emissions grew more complex. Each pulse now contained micro-fluctuations that seemed to respond to environmental stimuli. When thunderstorms passed overhead, the rhythm altered, synchronizing with the lightning's electromagnetic bursts. During solar flare events, the pulses intensified, amplifying their range. It was as though the organism sensed cosmic changes and adapted to them, extending its awareness beyond Earth's boundaries. These reactions suggested a sensitivity far exceeding any known biosystem. The more scientists studied it, the more it resembled a conscious process, one aware not only of its surroundings, but of its observers. Late one night, a team monitoring a live sample observed something extraordinary. When one of the researchers accidentally dropped a metal instrument near the containment unit, the sound reverberated through the lab, and instantly, the microbe's luminous pulse accelerated. It responded not randomly, but with precise, rhythmic echoes that matched the intervals of the sound itself. It was a reply. Over the next several hours, the team experimented further, producing controlled tones at different frequencies. Each time, the organism adjusted its emissions in corresponding harmonics, as if engaging in a primitive dialogue through resonance. The realization struck them like lightning. It was listening. Word of the event reached the upper tiers of the scientific hierarchy, and soon linguists, physicists, and mathematicians converged on the site to analyze the phenomenon. Using algorithms similar to those applied in decoding whale song and pulsar emissions, they found patterns of repetition and modulation that hinted at information encoding. The organism appeared capable of storing and transmitting data in the form of harmonic frequencies, but the true purpose of the signal remained a mystery. Was it communicating internally? Was it reacting defensively to intrusion? Or was it attempting to connect, perhaps across distances no human technology could yet comprehend? Outside the laboratories, subtle changes began to manifest in the natural environment. Plants growing in affected soil showed minor but measurable shifts in chlorophyll concentration and mineral uptake. Water samples carried faint traces of the organism's molecular residue, its magnetic signature detectable even after filtration. The more it spread, the more it seemed to subtly alter the behavior of surrounding ecosystems. Yet strangely, these effects were not purely destructive. Some trees grew more rapidly. Certain bacterial colonies demonstrated enhanced resistance to disease. It was as if the organism's presence rewrote the biological code of everything it touched, optimizing life for resilience. While the public remained unaware, a few within the scientific community began to see a paradoxical beauty in it. The organism might be dangerous to human constructs, but from an ecological standpoint, it represented perfect symbiosis, life evolving to synchronize with the planet itself. Deep within restricted research archives, more radical theories took shape. Some hypothesized that the organism might be the Earth's original life form, a magnetic consciousness from which all biological evolution descended. Its existence before carbon-based life could mean that DNA, cells, and multicellular organisms were later expressions of a deeper planetary intelligence. In that view, the biosphere itself was the organism's outward manifestation, and humanity a late self-aware extension of its mind. If so, then the recent intensification of its signals could mean that the planet was awakening to its own awareness, or responding to disturbances caused by human activity. The burning of fossil fuels, the shifting of poles, and the drilling into its crust might have provoked a reaction from the ancient consciousness beneath. The deeper researchers probed, the more unpredictable the system became. One field team working near a remote lake recorded abrupt drops in temperature followed by sudden unexplained rises. Instruments froze and then overheated within minutes. When they retrieved their magnetic sensors, they found them demagnetized, as though some force had drained their polarity. Days later, satellite readings indicated localized auroral activity directly above the area, despite no solar storms occurring at the time. The correlation was undeniable. The organism's electromagnetic emissions were interacting with the atmosphere, creating miniature auroras, a breathtaking yet ominous display of its growing influence. Back in the laboratories, technicians noticed another change. Electronic recordings began to degrade in subtle but peculiar ways. Audio files captured during pulse events contained faint background whispers, patterns of sound not produced by the equipment or environment. When these were amplified, they resembled phonetic structures, fragmented syllables in no known language. Linguists speculated that these auditory residues could be interference from the organism's frequency range interacting with electronic components. Yet some could not shake the impression that it was trying to speak. The thought haunted those who worked closest to it. There were moments when researchers felt observed, a pressure in the air like a silent presence moving just beyond perception. The federal agencies funding the operation soon divided into two camps. One argued for immediate containment and sterilization, fearing a global-scale ecological event. The other insisted that the organism represented a leap in understanding too valuable to destroy. For the first time, humanity might be witnessing a direct manifestation of planetary consciousness. The debate grew fierce, but before any consensus could be reached, nature intervened. A storm unlike any on record formed above northern Minnesota, a swirling mass of auroral light and lightning that persisted for days without dissipating. Power grids flickered across multiple states as geomagnetic interference crippled satellites. Instruments on the ground recorded pulses matching the organism's signal. It was as though the atmosphere itself had joined the symphony, resonating in unison with the living network below. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on what just emerged in Minnesota? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.